It's the amazing Rico Brogna podcast with your host, Evan Roberts.
Rico Brogna, how we doing on this beautiful wintry day in the tri-state area? But the good news is, if you go on the internet, or you turn on SNY, or you just check YouTube, you can see New York Met baseball players having a catch, throwing bullpen sessions, having batting practice in beautiful sunny Florida, which means we're getting a little bit closer to real games. We're getting a little bit closer to fake games. We're just getting a little bit closer to spring. There's a lot to talk about on episode 430 of Rico Brogna. Francisco Lindor with some interesting things to say, including his future as a captain, playing all 162 games. We'll address that. Edwin Diaz's future, including his desire to pitch in the World Baseball Classic again. Jose Iglesias going on a media tour because he really, really, really wants to be a New York Met. And with pitchers and catchers having reported, and now position players reporting, we make our official 26-man roster projection. And we will do that today on Rico as well. Let me start off with Francisco Lindor. And I don't know if this is an unpopular opinion. It may be, but I'll say it, and I guess we'll find out in the emails at thericob@gmail.com. But about 20-plus years ago, Christopher Mad Dog Russo, the great Christopher Mad Dog Russo, went on a rant about the Yankees announcing Derek Jeter as the team captain. This was right around 2003, if memory serves correct. So the dynasty has already, kind of happened. Jeter's Jeter, and the Yankees were making a big deal that they were naming him the captain. And Dog went on a rant basically saying, hey, who cares? I mean, does this matter? Like, what does it mean? And I kind of channel that when I hear all this talk about Francisco Lindor as captain. It's not a knock on Lindor. I love Lindor, and he is the captain of the team. But that whole official captaincy thing, whether it was with Jalen Brunson and the Knicks a few months ago, whether it was in Met history, whether it's in Yankee history, the Aaron Judge thing, I think the captaincy thing is maybe the single most overrated thing in all of sports. Look at our history. Forget the Yankees, forget the Knicks. Let's look at our history. This franchise has had 4 captains, okay? Keith Hernandez, Gary Carter, John Franco, and David Wright. Do you know what all of them have in common? They were all named captain kind of like at the end of their careers. Like it was almost a thank you for being here. Thank you for what you've done. We're going to put a C on your chest. Keith Hernandez was named captain in 1987. So it was after they won the World Series. And then a year later, they named Gary Carter captain. So they had co-captains. I think there was a bit of a rivalry between who was the real captain of the team. But nevertheless, 87 for Keith, 88 for Carter. They're both off the team after 1989. John Franco, who had a wonderful career as a Met, isn't named captain until 2001. He's no longer the closer by this point. And obviously the Mets' success is now gone. Got to the NLCS in 99, got to the World Series in 2000. And in the case of David Wright, David signs that extension. He's staying with us long-term. We think he still has a lot of time left in his career. And unfortunately, not David's fault, he's got the back issue. But he was named captain in 2013. So maybe it's my own bias towards what the captaincy has meant in Met history, but it's usually just a sign that you're at the end of your career. Francisco Lindor, hopefully, knock on wood, fingers crossed, is not at the end of his career. So it's a wonderful symbolic gesture. And I'm certainly not going to hate it if it happens. I just think it's kind of meaningless. With that said, Francisco Lindor was asked about the possibility of being named the New York Mets captain, the 5th in franchise history. And here's what Francisco Lindor had to say about being the New York Mets captain.
There's a lot of leaders in there, A captain thing is something that is not up for me to decide. If it does happen, it'll be fantastic. It will be an honor. It will be a privilege. Something I will never take for granted. Something that will put me next to the greats of this organization for forever, and it'll be very humbling. It's my job. It's not going to change. Just because I'm the captain doesn't mean I'm going to do more. I'm still going to go out there and hold guys accountable. I'm going to expect a lot out of myself too. I expect guys to, if they see me doing something that's not right, to come up to me and tell me as well, and to continue to lead, continue to play the game the right way, show up, post up, do whatever we got to do to win. You know, when I first came to this organization and that Steve and Alex brought me out here, my part of my job description was to help this organization become one of the best ones out there, and I have that in the very front of my mind. That it's just to make this organization one of the best ones out there. You got to win. That's number one, but also you got to do things the right way. You got to be accountable, and you have to respect your peers. You have to respect the game, and you just got to go out there day in and day out and post up. You know, and even if God willing it doesn't happen, if I'm hurt, you still got to show up and do the things the right way and support my teammates. And to win is not a one-man job. So if the captain thing is presented to me, it'll be a very humbling experience. But that's not up to me. That's something that front office gets to decide, and I don't know who else gets to decide on that. So if you guys make the decision, just let me know.
There's a couple of things from this answer. Number one, he is the Mets captain. Like that answer, everything about what he talked about, leadership, winning, doing what it takes, posting every day. By the way, that term posting every day, is that like a last 3-year thing? I hear it all the time now. Mendy says it, Lindor says it, posting. Like I don't remember that term from 7 or 8 years ago from playing every single day. But that answer, that beautiful answer, is why he is the Met captain, whether there's a C on his chest or not. My point here is not that he isn't the captain. It's that making it official or putting a C on one's chest doesn't really mean anything. He even said it. Like, it's not going to change his job. He's morphed into the leader of this team. And it's one of the most fascinating things to watch because in the long history of Met baseball and Yankee baseball, I'll include them too, when they sign a big-time free agent, or in the case of Lindor, trade for a player, and then immediately give them like a monster contract. So I know he isn't a free agent acquisition, but he felt like one because he got that new contract immediately. So he comes in, he's traded for good young players, Andres Jimenez, Ahmad Rosario, and then boom, here's the biggest contract in the history of the franchise. You come in with a lot of pressure. And more times than not, guys struggle when they first get here. Whether their name is Jason Giambi, whether their name is Carlos Beltran, you name the guy, they will have some kinds of struggles. And Francisco did. His first year here was far and away the worst year of his Met career, worst year of his major league career. And then you combine that with the fact that he ran into issues handling New York. So it wasn't just he was struggling, it was the thumbs down fiasco. And if you go back into that moment, August, September of 2021, considering the year he was having, considering the thumbs down fiasco, could any of us have imagined that Lindor would not only every single year get a little bit better, which has been true if you look at his numbers, but then also give such an answer like that, become the perfect leader for this team? It really is a stunning turnaround. I don't know, maybe stunning's too strong. A very surprising turnaround. But he is the leader of the team. I think that was made clear a year ago. So putting a C on his chest to me is just one of those overrated kind of things. Like, he's going to be the leader no matter what we say, they say, or what's on his chest. But the other thing he talked about that I think was really fascinating, because we've talked about this a little bit here on the Rico, especially during the offseason, was Lindor's ability to play 162. And how, as he gets a little bit older, as he dealt with that back issue last year, does Carlos Mendoza and the Mets have to consider giving him off days on a somewhat frequent basis? Well, here's what Lindor said about the fact that Carlos Mendoza said, hey, we may have to incorporate some off days for Francisco Lindor throughout this upcoming season.
Up on Howie's question earlier about 162 versus maybe pulling back a tad, Mendoza mentioned that he wants to talk to you about it, but he has ideas on what sounded like maybe an actual day off mixed in here and there, which, of course, was not the case really last year until the back thing popped up. Mm-hmm. Is that something you're open to, if that is something he feels strongly about?
MLB does a fantastic job with putting days off in the calendar. So we'll see.
I don't think I've ever heard a player say that.
It's always a first.
How about that? You have to love that. You do. Now, I think at the end of the day, if Carlos Mendoza, who has a pretty good feel for his room, looks at Lindor, maybe he's in a batting slump, or maybe you could just look. You see the look on his eyes, look on his face. He's dragging a little bit. That I think Mendoza has the authority and the respect to tell Francisco he's having an off day. But that is a guy right there, and you have to love it. There's no question. You have to love it. That's a guy who said, screw that, I'm playing 162. And I'll tell you why that's such an important kind of answer, an important thing to analyze. A little bit later on the Rico, we're going to project the 26-man roster. There is one fascinating question the Mets have to answer about their 26-man roster, and it directly involves Francisco Lindor and his ability to play every day. We'll get to that in a little bit. But the last thing that I thought was interesting that Lindor talked about, this just one made me laugh, was what was your favorite moment from 2024? Because that's such a Rico question. That's the thing we debate. Like, was it game 161? Was it the grand slam against the Phillies? Come on, Francisco. Tell me your favorite moment from 2024. Now, I want you to listen to this whole thing because I think you get all the goodness that is the captain, unofficial or not, of the New York Mets, Francisco Lindor. So take a listen to his answer when being questioned about his favorite moment or moments from the OMG 2024 season.
In a storybook season like last year, you started off a little slow, and then the way clutch moment after clutch moment down the stretch. Is there one particular moment that stands out to you, and have you kind of gone back and watched those moments?
One specific moment that stands out to me, I would say celebrating with the boys. There was a lot of moments throughout the year. I mean, Sevy's complete game was fantastic. How Mendy came out and said, and he just said, no, I'm not coming out. I want to finish this. Mendy told him, finish it. Sean, how he stepped up. How Quintana stepped up, how Iglesias, how Marte having a fantastic playoff run, Viento stepping up, it's just Diaz. It's just a lot,
I mean, for you personally, like, you have to realize what you did.
I think the breaking the no-hitter in Toronto, that was kind of cool. Just because I didn't want to get no hit. And I told Iglesias coming up to that at bat, I said, I'm giving everything I got, no matter what. So out of this at bat, something's gonna happen. Hopefully he's on our side. So that was good. And Atlanta home run was cool. Philly home run, that's the answer everybody's looking for. So, yes, that was fantastic. Those were great. Dodgers home runs were great. Diving plays were fantastic. Yeah, I don't take any moment for granted. So, it's a highlight. I do the same thing everybody does. I go to YouTube and watch them.
So then, I love that answer. There's a lot there. First, he doesn't know how to answer it. And then he goes humble route. He goes captain route, right? He goes leader route. He says celebrating with the boys. All right, let me now give a specific moment from the season. And Hoff, if I gave you a list, forget about just Lindor. Forget about just what he did specifically. If I gave you a list of moments from the season, no offense to Sevy, who's not even here anymore, are we putting Sevy's complete game on a Saturday night at the top of the list?
No, I forgot that he even did that, to be honest with you. I mean, no, there's like 1,000 other plays I'd go before that. So, yeah, not happening. Listen, I love Lindor's answer at the end. I go to YouTube and watch the highlights. Right. That to me is awesome.
I go to YouTube, and oh, by the way, I'm just going to give you what you want. You want me to list all the great things we did this year? Fine. All the great things I did. 161 against Atlanta. There you go. Grants. I'll play you the hits. But I think maybe I'm reading too much into it. I think his answer on Sevy said a lot about his respect for the manager, Carlos Mendoza, because he didn't just say Luis Severino pitched a complete game and it was amazing. He said Mendy was going to take him out. And Sevy looked at him in the eyes and said, I ain't coming out of this game. And if you ask me, hey, what was the best part of Carlos Mendoza from 2024? What was the best part? And a lot of it's tough to measure. We're not in the room. But his handling of pitching sometimes, his handling of a starter. Quintana had that moment early in the season against St. Louis. And Sevy obviously had that moment in the complete game where he trusts his guys. If a pitcher's going to look him in the eye and say, I want to stay in the game, he's going to allow that, which is not as common a thing in this day and age. But then, Lindor gives us the red meat we all want, all the great moments from this past season. But even his answers to such a basic question like, hey, you had a great year. What's your favorite moment? It's team-oriented first. It really is. And it shows the kind of leader he has become. And that's the best part. It's not like he walked in here. I hear the stories of Keith Hernandez back in 1983. As much as he didn't want to be here, he walked through the door. He was a leader day one. That was it. Keith Hernandez was the leader the moment he walked into that room. It doesn't feel like that was the case at all with Lindor. It felt like it took a couple of years. And now, as we begin this, pressurized season, the season with expectations, it really feels like he has fully embraced that role. Now, let me get to Edwin Diaz.
Could I just say something really quick about Lindor?
Of course, go ahead.
Because I think the one thing that we forget about him, like you kind of talked about it, like, it took him a couple of years maybe to get here. But remember where he first started, and the reality is that he was not prepared. No one prepared him for New York media. No one prepared him for the way that the fans would react to every little thing he did, whether it's the raccoon stuff with Jeff McNeil, the thumbs down. I mean, there was a lot of stuff that a lot of players would not come back from. And he's now developed into this guy who Mets fans are begging to be the next captain.
I'll give you an example, and I hope no one takes this as a rip because I like the Met. I think he was a very good Met. But I don't know if Carlos Beltran ever fully recovered from his first year as a Met. Now, think about it. He had a bad year. Okay, so did Lindor. In fact, Lindor probably had a worse first year than Carlos did, if you really want to break down the numbers. But Beltran had this strained relationship with Met fans. He didn't come out for that curtain call early in year two. And while I think Met fans ended up liking him, he was never beloved. He just never was, for whatever reason. He was never able to become like the guy. Lindor has, which if you asked me in 2021, 2022, I wouldn't have guessed it. I just said, yeah, he'll be a good Met. He'll end up putting up big numbers and he'll be liked in Met history. I never knew if he would be able to get that kind of bond with Met fans that he's created. But Beltran to me is an interesting comp in that he had a very good career. He may end up in the Hall of Fame as a Met, as we've discussed, and yet he was never able to fully get that embrace from Met fans and recover from his first year here.
Think about this season alone, though. Like, how many moments were the Mets basically out of the season?
Yeah.
The season was over, and then Francisco Lindor himself did something to put them over the top. Carlos Beltran had that one moment in 2006, and that's all Mets fans remember.
Well, here's the problem. Beltran had a lot of other clutch moments. They weren't put on an exclamation point the way Lindor was, because when he has a clutch moment in 2007, which he did in September, they still choke to end the season, so nobody cares. When he hits a big home run in the final game at Chase Stadium, they still lose the game, so nobody cares. It would be the equivalent of Lindor hits that game-tying home run in Toronto to break up the no-hitter, and they lose in the bottom of the ninth anyway. Would anybody give a rat's ass? Or Lindor hits the home run in game 161, and then Diaz gives up a bomb to Travis D'Arnaud in the bottom of the ninth. Would anybody care? So sometimes it's the luck of the result, but nevertheless, Lindor has been fully embraced as a Met, and he will get, like Soto, like Alonso, a monstrous standing ovation on opening day. As far as Diaz is concerned, Edwin Diaz said a couple of interesting things. Number one, the opt-out. He's got 2 years left on his deal. He'd be paid $18 million a year, or he can opt out. And Edwin was very honest. He didn't pull a DeGrom a couple of years ago when Jake announced to the world in spring training, I am opting out. Edwin said at the end of the year, I'll evaluate it with my agent, which is the most honest answer one can have. Because if Edwin Diaz has a super dominant season like he did in 2022, there's a very good to decent chance that his agent is going to tell him, you know what, despite your age right now, you can do better than 2 years, $36 million. Next year, Edwin Diaz is going to be 31 years old. So it's not like he's going to be 35, but it really is going to come down to what kind of year he has. Last year, he pitched to a 3.5 ERA, saved 20 games, and lost the closer's role. In 2022, he pitched to a 1.3 ERA with 32 saves, striking out 17 guys per 9 innings. If he puts up numbers like that, even at the age of 31, he's going to opt out. But, and we don't know this yet from David Stearns because we have an idea about how he feels about starters. I'll make you this prediction. And this, I guess, is the double-edged sword if you want Diaz or not. If he opts out, he's done. Like, if he opts out, I think David Stearns is going to say, okay, well, thank you for your time. You were here for parts of 7 seasons. We appreciate that. Good luck in your future endeavors. I have a tough time believing at 31 years old, Diaz is getting a 4 to 5 year contract from David Stearns. You also have to keep an eye on the other closer free agents. Devin Williams is going to be a big factor in all this too. He's one of the preeminent closers in baseball. He's going to be a free agent at the end of the year. But the reality is, and this is the way I'm kind of taking this year to year with Pete Alonso and his free agency, the case of Edwin Diaz, just go out and have a dominant year. Let there be good problems to figure out next year. And one thing we're going to do next week, I'm looking forward to this, is we are going to have a crystal ball 2026 offseason edition of the Rico. So as much as I'm not going to think about this during the season, and we shouldn't think about it during the season, we will have one podcast where we'll think all about next offseason. And the reason I think it's a good idea to do is we get it out of our system, because I'm not a big fan. I felt this way during this past year when the Mets are struggling and it's, well, Soto's coming. And I'm like, Jesus, can we finish the freaking season? Can we have a season before we're talking about a free agent? Even during the depths of hell, I felt that way. Like, hey, this season could turn. You never know. Baseball can turn on a dime. You have no idea. Luckily, it did, shockingly enough. But I'm not big on talking about next offseason. That's why my thought is, you know what? Late February, early part of spring training, let's just get it out of our system. And so Edwin Diaz will be a focus. The other thing Diaz said, and I know this is going to piss a lot of people off, so let's just talk about it, talk through it, and get it out of the way, is he said he would like to pitch in the World Baseball Classic in 2026. So he's not going to jump up and down if he gets a big strikeout in the WBC. He doesn't even jump up and down anymore for us. When he got that final out against Philadelphia in the division series against Kyle Schwarber, he stood there and he told everybody, no jumping up and down. So if we're being rational, there really isn't a risk to Edwin Diaz getting hurt the same exact way. Now, can he get hurt pitching? Sure he can, but he can get hurt pitching while pitching in spring training. And you got to help me out with this, Hoff. I don't know if you're the perfect person to ask this to, but I'm confused about something and maybe you can help me. The Four Nations hockey tournament that the NHL has put together is getting incredibly rave reviews. It's awesome. There were these fights between U.S., Canada. The games are intense. This is amazing. I'm not disagreeing that it was entertaining, by the way. This is not a fight about that. It's a fight about the hypocrisy of it. It is a completely made-up tournament, much like the World Baseball Classic. It is not the Olympics, much like the World Baseball Classic. So it is a made-up tournament. This is the first time we're ever having something called the Four Nations Tournament, Four Nations Classic, okay? We're using NHL players the way we use MLB players. Guys can get hurt. In fact, they're fighting with each other. So the risk of injury is higher in the Four Nations than it is in the WBC. And oh, by the way, the WBC is before the season even starts. So even if a guy gets hurt, there's a decent chance they can come back in time. This is happening in the middle of a hockey season. And yet the majority of opinions are this is amazing, while in baseball, it's this sucks. I only care about my team. I'm very confused by the hypocrisy. I like both, by the way. I'm not a hypocrite. I think the Four Nations is badass, and I'm a fan of the WBC. So can you or someone else explain to me the utter hypocrisy when it comes to these two tournaments? Because I'm confused.
See, I am on your side with this, that I think that they need to do this during the off season. Like, I don't need, first of all, hockey screwing themselves because they take about 2 weeks off. Now, listen, All-Star break would have happened during this time, but they're taking 2 weeks off from their season to do this.
Right.
Now, to your point, dude, Matthew Tkachuk sat out the last 10 minutes of the third period with an injury. Why? Maybe it's because he took a fist to the head in the first 9 seconds of the game. JT Miller, I'm a Ranger fan. He went up against a guy that was 7 feet taller than him. I don't want to see him get hurt. If he got hurt, I would ban Four Nations from ever happening again. But the point is, and the reason why people are getting excited about it is only because how intense and real they're taking it. If their team gets affected in 2 weeks and they miss out on a playoff berth because JT Miller's hurt, yeah, this is going to backfire miserably.
I get the concern about your team's health, and like in your case, that's consistent to what we said about the WBC. So I respect that. It's more, it felt like with the WBC, there was more, oh my God, this is horrible. And oh, by the way, who cares? It's a made-up tournament. It's not real. Meanwhile, the WBC has a history now that goes back to 2006. So they created something. It now has a history. This thing's made up, much like the WBC. And like you said, you're in the middle of a season. While in spring training, I think the reason I like the WBC is that I'm thirsty for baseball. It is early March, and those guys would be playing in spring training games anyway, so it's almost like they're getting ready for the season. The pitching is obviously complicated. It's not like real baseball because you got to handle them with a little bit more care. But I'm watching the reactions to both, and I find it fascinating. I'll just tell you this about Diaz. I have no problem with him pitching in the World Baseball Classic. I think that we need to take a deep breath and realize that injuries happen. And I think in the sport of baseball, the risk is as high getting hurt playing 6 or 7 innings at Digital Domain Park or Clover Field, whatever they call it now, versus doing it in the WBC. It's not a physical sport like hockey or football. Like, your injuries are the same. You're running to first base, you can pull a hamstring. You're swinging, you can injure yourself. You can get hit by a pitch. Like, I think that the injury risk is not as high as we think. I understand the Diaz thing ruined our season. We all know that. But we also have to be rational and remember that it was a freaking fluke. That's what it was. It was, the guy was jumping up and down and he ripped up his foot. I mean, come on.
Well, that's the thing, though. I think fans would have been furious if he did it while he was pitching, but that would have been like, well, if he was pitching in the World Baseball Classic or was pitching in a spring training game, that might have happened anyway. He was celebrating. It was something that was like stupid. It's not the real season. So that was what really pissed a lot of people off. I think that if he tore up his knee just throwing a ball, it might not have been as bad of a reaction.
I understand. Let me get to some of your emails, and then we'll get to projecting the 26-man roster and a very interesting question that David Stearns was posed. But first, this is from Dan. Dan writes, hey, Evan, love the pod, listen to every episode, blah, blah, blah. He says a lot of nice things. Thank you. I had a question, though. You say you're happy about a 6-man rotation because Mendy would be able to push the starters more because of the extra rest. To me, though, most starters are not pulled due to fatigue, but the analytics saying a pitcher shouldn't face a lineup a third time. I'm not sure the Mets starters will be given the chance to go deeper into games despite the extra rest, nor should they if the results show pitchers facing a third hitter are less effective. I'm curious to hear your thoughts. So 2 things. Number 1, I don't know if Carlos Mendoza is going to push his starters more with a 6-man rotation. I plan to ask him it, though. I'm curious to see what his answer is. I think there are 2 things you can do with a 6-man rotation that are interesting, fascinating, and a little cutting edge. I'm not sure Mendy's going to do any of them, but I'll suggest them right now on the Rico and we could talk about it. Number 1, you questioned it. I'll give you an answer to it. Pushing guys a little bit longer because they have an extra day of rest, and they're not going to make 32 starts in a year. If you maintain a 6-man rotation for the entire year, you're talking about 25 starts in a season. You're cutting out 5, 6, 7 starts over the course of 162. That's number 1. Number 2, and I would be very up for this, if Mendy can make it work in which the pitchers feel comfortable with their routine. And that is using a starting pitcher out of the bullpen on their throw day. You are already putting yourself in a tricky spot when you have a 6-man rotation because remember, you're only allowed to have 13 pitchers on your roster. So you're cutting out a guy from your bullpen. Well, you can re-add the guy to your bullpen if on the third day, that guy's available out of the bullpen to throw 25 or 30 pitches. Remember, they're going to throw less innings this year because of a 6-man rotation. They're making less starts this year. They're given extra rest. A lot of times there are off days, so it's more than 5 days rest. It's 6 days rest, so it's something you can do. I plan on asking Carlos Mendoza if he will. But those are two things in theory I like about a six-man rotation. Now, let me get to your answer about, well, guys are taken out, not because of pitch count, not because of being tired, but because of how they fare third time around the batting order. So in some cases, you're completely right. Let's take a guy like Frankie Montas. Frankie Montas is obviously new as a New York Met, but when you look at his splits, first time, second time, third time, the difference is monumental. Monumental. You see it. 600 OPS first time around. It jumps up to like 780 second time around. Third time around, you're freaking Mike Trout. It's 850. So with a guy like Frankie Montas, you're right. If he's not going to be effective the third time around the batting order, no matter how much rest you have, I'm still going to make the best baseball decision. Don't disagree with you. But what if I told you there's a couple of guys on the rotation where those numbers don't back that up? Let's go to Kodai Senga. Kodai Senga is the reason we're going to have a six-man rotation. Kodai Senga is viewed as, get him out after 85 pitches. What if I told you in his first year, the full year he had with the Mets in which he went out and made every start in 2023, let me share you his first, second, third time around the batting order splits. First time around the batting order, 221 average, 638 OPS. Second time around, 193, 614 OPS. Third time around, 195, 606 OPS. Kodai Senga showed no sign in a full sample size of his first year as a Met of wearing down third time around the batting order. So with him, at least, it's not a thing. You take him out when you see he's tiring. You take him out when you see he's ineffective, and getting that extra rest may help him throw 98 pitches instead of 90. Let's get to David Peterson. David Peterson had a great second half, and I was curious about him because I was trying to remember, like, how was he third time around the batting order? And he was pretty good. Here are his numbers. First time around the order, and with Peterson, I'm only including last year. I'm not including the beginning part of his career because, quite frankly, to be nice, he sucked. So looking at bad David Peterson does us no good. Let's look at good David Peterson because we're certainly all hoping that's who he is. First time around the batting order last year, 199 batting average against, 528 OPS. Amazing numbers, by the way. Second time around, there's a huge jump, 283, 783. But then third time around, it comes all the way back down to 244, 699 OPS. So the numbers with Senga and Peterson don't indicate that third time around is going to be an issue. We have no data on Clay Holmes. This whole thing with Clay Holmes is a brand new experiment. And Sean Manaea's numbers, it gets worse third time, but it's not awful. Like, he wasn't throwing batting practice third time around. It was a little bit of a change, but nothing horrible. So to answer your question, and it's a good one, Dan, it's a case-by-case basis. Obviously, if the data is pointing to, hey, this guy's really ineffective third time around the batting order, then yeah, you're going to be very careful when you go that third time around. I think the six-man rotation allows you, doesn't mean you have to do it. It allows you the ability to push your starter a little bit more, knowing they're not coming back 4 days later. And it also, again, allows you, if you want to be creative and flexible with your roster, to use a starting pitcher. Like Clay Holmes is a great example, because for him, pitching out of the bullpen one time every 2 weeks isn't going to be a terrible thing. If you treat it like a throw day and you make sure you're not abusing that guy that one day, it's a way to steal an inning out of the bullpen with a starting pitcher. I'm not saying it has to happen all the time, and I don't think it's going to happen with a guy like Kodai Senga, but with a guy like Clay Holmes, who has experience out of the bullpen, maybe even a guy like Sean Manaea, who has experience out of the bullpen, it's something you can do. Doesn't mean I think Mendy's going to do it, but I certainly plan on asking him, because I think that a six-man rotation allows you the ability to be creative. And baseball's changing over the last couple of years, and sometimes we assume it's all bad, but there are some changes that are good. I'll never forget a discussion I had. I was doing my Saturday show 15 years ago. It was a long time ago, and I had a newly retired baseball analyst on by the name of Gabe Kapler, who obviously would go on and manage. And Gabe was giving his baseball views. And one of his views was, hey, if I've got a top-notch closer, I'd use them at any point in the game to get the biggest outs of the game, because the biggest outs of the game may actually be in the 7th or 8th inning and not the 9th inning. And during that interview, I said, Gabe, you're a man of my own heart. I completely agree. It's one of those things I don't understand. I don't understand why a closer only pitches the ninth inning. That conversation 15 years ago felt a little out of the box and cutting edge. It's not anymore. It's the way baseball's handled. How many times have we seen Edwin Diaz come into a game in the eighth inning to just get a couple of outs? That's a good change in baseball. It's not a bad change. It's a good change. We don't need to look at saves as the end-all be-all. So I look at the six-man rotation as the next evolution in this sport, and I wonder if some of the things that can come out of it are good, like being able to push a starting pitcher deeper into a game. That would be a good thing. Appreciate the email. We'll try to mix in some more emails. We get a ton of them, and we appreciate it. TheRicoB@gmail.com. Let's get to Jose Iglesias. So, John Heyman. John, I love you, John. We used to have John all the time when Joe and I did our shows. John Heyman has no shame because he did an exclusive interview with Jose Iglesias. They went out to lunch where Jose Iglesias is stating his case to return as a member of the New York Mets. And I only say John has no shame because Iglesias is a Boris guy. So this feels like Scott Boras saying, hey, John, can you go out with Jose? Can you do an interview with him? Can you get the fans all riled up that they should want him back? And maybe the public pressure, like it worked with Pete Alonso, is going to work on the Mets to bring Iglesias back. So that's how I perceived it. So the Iglesias thing is very complicated. I'm very mixed about it, as I think I've expressed here on the Rico. I think that this team needs to move on from the gimmicks of last year. But I think about him in two terms that are important. Number one, locker rooms matter. I do think this is a very strong locker room, and they won't fall apart because Jose Iglesias isn't there. But I also think of the baseball aspect. So right now, when you project the 26-man roster, and remember, a couple of things you need to know right off the top. You cannot carry more than 13 pitchers on a roster. Cannot. That is a rule. That is mandatory. You could carry 12. You could carry 11, but very rarely do teams do that. They will go 13, and they will go 13. So that means, barring injury, the New York Mets already have 3 spots completely locked up. The backup catcher role, Luis Stearns. The other DH, Winker or Marte. And the other center fielder, Siri or Taylor. That's 3. That means there is only 1 spot left. And remember, they don't have any backup infielders. So that last spot has to go to a backup infielder. And wouldn't you want that backup infielder to be, let's say, a shortstop? Because they don't have a shortstop on the roster. So can Brett Beatty be the one backup infielder? That would leave them with no shortstops. Could Jared Young be the one backup infielder? He hasn't played shortstop. Nick Madrigal is learning shortstop, so we'll throw him in the mix. Ronnie Mauricio is certainly not in the mix because he's not going to start playing games till the middle of March. And then you have, of course, Luis Angel Acuna, who plays shortstop. So this is all going to come back to Iglesias, and it's going to connect to the 26-man roster projection. They have 1 spot left, barring injury, okay? Unless they're carrying less pitchers, which I truly doubt. If they carry less pitchers, it would be for a week and a half. You know what I mean? Like, they would look at the off days and say, you know what, with the off days, we can handle 1 less pitcher. We'll stick someone on the IL to start the year, extended spring training, and then we'll come back to 13-13. But they're going to go 13-13 majority of the year. So they have 1 bench spot. Can the Mets break camp without a backup shortstop? We played that clip of Lindor earlier. He wants to play every day. If he's going to play every day, here's how you can break camp without a backup shortstop. You could have Brett Beatty make the team, or Jared Young, whoever you want, who's not a shortstop. And if something happens to Lindor mid-game, you have your emergency shortstop. Let's say it's Jeff McNeil. Let's say it's Brett Beatty, only for a few innings to get through that game. The following day, you obviously rush to make a roster move, and here comes Luis Angel Acuna. You can do that. If your plan is Lindor's going to play every day, then yes, you can get away with that. That just means he's literally playing every day. There are no off days. And if there's an injury, you get through that night, you make a move the next day. Or the other option is to have a shortstop on your roster. Well, we just went through the options. It's Luis Angel Acuna, It's Nick Madrigal, if you want to consider him a shortstop. He's learning it here in spring training. And I can't even include Ronnie Mauricio because I don't think he's an option based on the fact he's not going to play till the middle of March. And that brings you to Jose Iglesias. Wouldn't he just be the answer? If you feel, listening to this discussion, yes, they need a backup shortstop, bro. You can't do this. Then it can be Jose Iglesias. Now, if you sign him tomorrow to a major league contract, that's it. There's no competition for anybody else barring injury. The roster is completely frozen, but it at least makes sense. There's your backup shortstop who hit .337 last year and who, by the way, may play plenty at second base if Jeff McNeil is struggling. So there's an avenue to Jose Iglesias being the guy. But there is one caveat that I think would push back on a lot of Met fans. And it's certainly not Nick Madrigal. It's Luis Angel Acuna. Luis Angel Acuna obviously plays shortstop. He's also played second, a little bit of third. Center field gives you great versatility. And when he came up last year filling in for Lindor, he was fantastic. If I put a poll out right now, I'm sure plenty of Met fans would say, listen, OMG, I love you. Give me Acuna. There's no other player I mentioned that Met fans would rather see than Jose Iglesias. They're not saying Nick Madrigal. At this point, they're not saying Brett Beatty. Acuna's the only guy. So then it comes down to this, David Stearns. Are you okay with a prospect being up here as a bench player? Because if Acuna makes the team as the super utility backup infielder, at least at first, there are not a lot of guaranteed at-bats. Luckily, David Stearns was pointedly asked that question. Hey, David, would you be okay with Luis Angel Acuna making the team and not being guaranteed consistent at-bats?
Would you then be comfortable carrying him on the major league roster the way that it stands, with it just being like that smaller sort of bench utility type that's up for grabs?
Yeah, I think that's a discussion we're going to continue to have throughout camp, and it's a possibility. He's in that competition. He's part of that competition, but we've got a lot of time to make that decision. There's a lot of things that can happen between now and then before we have to make that decision. So we'll answer that when we need to at the end of camp.
That is a punt, ladies and gentlemen. That's Thomas Morstead punting the football into the other end zone. He doesn't want to answer it. And I get it. He's right. A lot of things can happen over the next month. There could be injuries. I mean, injuries are the biggest caveat to our projection of a 26-man roster. Guys get hurt, everything changes. And that may be what Jose Iglesias is waiting on. He's got major league offers elsewhere, according to John Heyman, Scott Boras. Okay, he could take one of those. But he may be waiting for A, someone to get hurt, or B, the Mets to have a change of heart on Iglesias. If they are not willing to carry Luis Angel Acuna as a super utility backup infielder, then it makes the most sense for this roster for Jose Iglesias to be on it. Because as much as I want to see Brett Beatty get an opportunity, they need a backup shortstop on this roster. And Brett will get an opportunity. If one guy gets hurt, it doesn't matter the position. If one guy gets hurt, besides catcher, obviously, Beatty gets called. If Vientos gets hurt, Beatty gets called. If Alonso gets hurt, Beatty gets called. Like, he's going to be the first guy up. Now, it sucks that if everybody's healthy, which is not sucking. I mean, it's amazing if everybody's healthy, but if everybody's healthy, then it sucks for Brett. He's a AAA. There's just no other way. There's no other option unless you're comfortable with him playing shortstop. Or my idea of just don't have a backup shortstop. And if God forbid someone gets hurt, whatever, get through the night and then you make a change the next day. To illustrate my point, Bruce B wrote an email to the Rico B. And it was a very simple question, but this question will go in line to what we're talking about. He writes, it might be fun to have a Rico where you substitute players at every position in case of an injury at that position. So here's what's fun about that, Bruce. Third base's backup is Brett Beatty. Shortstop's backup is Luis Angel Acuna. Second base's backup is Brett Beatty. First base's backup is Brett Beatty. A DH injury, Marte or Winker, Brett Beatty. Brandon Nimmo gets hurt, Brett Beatty. Not that he's playing left field, but maybe Winker's playing left field and Beatty DHs. Injury in center field. Obviously, the other center fielder would play more, but guess who gets called up? Brett Beatty. God forbid Soto gets hurt. Brett Beatty. Brett Beatty is the number one, besides shortstop, because he can't play it, is the number one backup in case someone gets hurt. So I love that question, Bruce, because it leads right into where Brett's going to get his opportunity. But the way I frame this to David Stearns, in my opinion, and I'm cutting out the music, I'm cutting out the locker room stuff, I'm strictly talking baseball, is if you're not comfortable carrying Luis Angel Acuna as the super utility backup infielder to start the season because you want him to get consistent at-bats at AAA. By the way, respect the hell out of it. I understand it. I'm not even yelling at you. I'm like, okay, you think that highly of him. He didn't have a great year at AAA last year. He needs consistent at-bats. Okay. Then you sign Jose Iglesias. Because Nick Madrigal, and I'm not, throwing salt all over Nick Madrigal or burying the kid. He's still relatively young. He has a little bit of major league experience. He puts the bat on the ball. He's a former top prospect. He's never played shortstop. So you back up shortstop as a guy. And here's the other issue I have with Nick Madrigal. Remember, the Mets are carrying literally one guy who can play the infield as a backup. One. That's the way this roster is set up. All those outfielders and DHs are outfielders. They're going to have 6 guys on their roster who can only play the outfield. Brandon Nimmo, Tyrone Taylor, Jose Siri, Juan Soto, Starling Marte, Jesse Winker. You want to stick Winker at first base? Whatever. 6 guys who are essentially outfielders and DHs. Luis Torrens, Francisco Alvarez, catchers. You have one guy who would be your backup infielder. So if there's a day you want to sit Jeff McNeil, this is the guy who's playing. If there's a day you want to sit Mark Vientos, this is the guy who's playing. You really want that guy to be Nick Madrigal? That guy should be, if it's not Luis Angel Acuna, Jose Iglesias. And that's where Iglesias makes sense. I think the Mets, there are 2 ways, in my opinion, where the Iglesias thing can just happen and we're good to go. Number one, and this is going to take a humbling from Jose, is to accept a minor league contract. Sounds horrible, sounds mean, sounds unfair. He had 337 last year. You want to be a Met so bad, and clearly you do. You're going out to lunch with John Heyman begging for a job. If you want to be a Met so bad, take a minor league contract. I mean, I get it. It sucks. You're 337. It gives the Mets the flexibility they want. Are they going to send you down to start the year? Probably not. Very unlikely, but it gives them that flexibility. So number one is take a minor league contract. And number 2 is to wait this bad boy out, because one injury changes everything. Or the Mets firmly deciding, hey, we want Luis Angel Acuna to play in the minor leagues, or hey, we don't like the way Nick Madrigal is playing defense at shortstop, could open up that gate to Iglesias coming back. But the reason why Iglesias over Madrigal to me is borderline a no-brainer is Jeff McNeil doesn't play every day. Even when he was winning his batting title, like he'd sit here and there. And even this year, to me, he's on the hot seat at second base. You got to put some pressure on him. Nick Madrigal doesn't apply pressure on him. Iglesias would. By the way, Acuna would. That's why if their decision is Luis Angel Acuna, I'm good. Like, I'm not arguing that one. And I don't think most Met fans would. We like the kid. And I think if Mendy wants to get aggressive with it, he can find ways to get him at bats. Again, Jeff McNeil is going to be the real kind of victim to all this. I don't think he's going to find at bats in center field early on, though I think that could be the end game, certainly at some point, because I think Siri and Taylor are going to get that first crack. A guy gets hurt, sure, we're talking about something different. But I think where he can get his at bats is at second base to start the season. So here is your 26-man roster projection. Obviously, we've spent a lot of times on the position players. I am going to project Luis Torrens and Francisco Alvarez behind the plate. Rico Brogna can now project Luis Torrens and Francisco Alvarez behind the plate. I'm going to project 6 outfielders / DHs, Brandon Nimmo, Tyrone Taylor, Jose Siri, Juan Soto, Starling Marte, and Jesse Winker. That gets us to 8. And then we have 5 position player spots open: Lindor, Vientos, McNeil, and Alonso. I'm going to say the fifth guy is Luis Angel Acuna because I'm hopeful it's not Nick Madrigal. No offense to Nick Madrigal, but for the reasons I laid out, I think ultimately they are going to want a backup shortstop. I think ultimately Iglesias is not going to accept a minor league deal. And ultimately, I think they're going to decide, you know what? Mendy can find a way to get him some at-bats. Plus, he is going to serve him a lot of use as a speedster off the bench. Winker, Marte, that platoon at DH, Acuna's a pinch runner. Late in the game, you're down by a run or two. You could even get uber aggressive and make Acuna a pinch runner for other guys. So I'm going to project Luis Angel Acuna is that fifth infielder, and that gets us to 13 position players, which is what I think they'll carry to start the season. There's a chance they go to 14, like I said, but it would be temporary. Now let's get to the pitching because this is a little bit more complicated. But first, Hoff, are you projecting the same 13 position players, or is there any change you want to make to that?
No, I think that Madrigal is going to get the first shot because we saw that last year too. I know I hate it, but it seems like David Stearns likes to go to these depth guys that he brings in and sees what they have. Like, and that's what eventually brought Iglesias to the forefront. Is he was on that level before the prospects got called up. It was Joey Wendell, Zach Short, and then Jose Iglesias. So I don't think Cunha is going to get the shot just yet. So I think that Madrigal will make that 13th spot.
You may be right. It's a tough one. Like I was 50-50 on it too. So we'll see. We'll see who's right about this. Or maybe we're both wrong and it's Jose Iglesias after all this. You never know. All right, so the pitching's a little bit more complicated. Again, 13 spots. At least I'm under the impression they're going to go 13 to start the year. I've gone back and forth on, do I include injuries in this? And I am. Now, I'm not going to make up injuries, but I'm going to give you guys who are coming back off of injuries who I think I'm going to project to start the year on the injured list. And again, I hope I'm wrong. This is not something I want to be right about. So we've got 7 starting pitchers. 6 of them will be in the rotation. 1 will go to the bullpen as a long man. Kodai Senga, David Peterson, Sean Manaea, Clay Holmes, Frankie Montas, Griffin Canning, and Paul Blackburn. A part of me has thought that I would project Blackburn to be traded. And not for a major leaguer, but for some kind of minor league depth. The only reason why I'm going to lean against it is Stearns has talked about the starting pitching depth that they have. He even invoked the name Julio Teheran the other day when talking about how little depth they had last year. He said, yeah, 3 weeks into the season, we're signing Julio Teheran, and he's making a start in Atlanta. And he's right. Like, that's one aspect of Stearns' conversation on pitching, which of course he's right about it. Of course they have more depth. You know, Julio Teheran's making a freaking start in April. So I think Griffin Canning is going to start the year as a long reliever. So I'm going to go, especially because early in the year, I don't think the starters are going deep into games. Like, I think they're going to take it a little bit easy early on. So I think Griffin Canning is going to be the guy that can eat those innings up. So I am projecting Senga, Peterson, Manaea, Holmes, Montas. Blackburn will be the 6th guy. Griffin Canning will be the swingish guy at 7/bullpen. That leaves us 6 spots left. Edwin Diaz, Ryan Stanek, Jose Budo are the 3 locks. I'm very concerned about A.J. Minter starting the year on the IL. Now, Mendy has said all he needs is 4 or 5 appearances. He'll be good to go. I don't think he's going to have a setback. I'm not sitting here projecting that. I'm projecting the Mets are going to run with caution here, and he's just not going to be ready to start the season. So sue me for this. I apologize. I was going back and forth. Do I do this? Do I go perfect world, or do I actually use my brain and realize that not everything is going to go perfect? So I'm going to project A.J. Minter to start the year on the IL, but I don't think it's like catastrophic. I think it's just, hey, they're going to give it a little bit more time. That leaves 3 spots left. Reed Garrett, who does have options left, will make the team at number 4. Danny Young and Sean Reed Foley do not have options. They've got none left. And that is why I'm going to project Sean Reed Foley to make the team, but not Danny Young. I know he's a lefty, and so if A.J. Minter's out, wouldn't it be Danny Young? What about Hennessy's Cabrera? But I'm actually going to project no lefties in the bullpen to start, and I'll go Dednell Nunez. So I'm going to go Dednell Nunez to be healthy. I'll go Sean Reed Foley, who I also can see getting hurt again and starting the year on the IL. But I'm going to go Deadnell, Sean Reed-Foley, Reed Garrett, Jose Budo, Ryan Stanek, Edwin Diaz. That gets you to 6 relievers to go along with Griffin Canning at 7. That gets you to 13. I think Danny Young, unfortunately, will be DFA'd. We'll see if he can end up back in the minors. I think Tyler McGill will start the year at AAA. Same thing with Zuber and Brazoban and Kranick and a lot of the other guys that may be competing for spots. And I think A.J. Minter gets activated about a week into the season. So they buy a little bit more time with a guy like Sean Reed-Foley. And that's how I project the 26. So we'll see if I'm right. We'll check in on this on March 27th and see how accurate I am. Your thoughts, Off?
See, I texted you earlier in the week about the guys that are a few guys that you didn't even name right there.
Go ahead.
Like Chris Davinsky, Genesis Cabrera, you did say.
Yep.
But Huascar Brazoban, I don't know if you mentioned his name at all, but I feel like those guys are going to be in the mix, especially Cabrera. I think that this pitching lab is going to get them involved quick. So
here's the complicated part. Huascar Brazoban has an option left. And I know this sucks, but options matter because the Mets can very easily just send Huascar Brazoban to AAA. And so he will be up eventually. He'll be on this team. You know the way it works. There'll be 30 different pitchers used. Cabrera and Davinsky were minor league invites, so it's more complicated with them. Would they accept going to AAA? I don't know. Would another team pick them up? I don't know. I think Genesis Cabrera and Chris Davinsky are interesting. Anthony Gose was another guy they brought up. Brandon Waddle. Like, they've got a lot of names, but there's only a certain amount of spots. And that's why the guys who have options are likelier to just go to the minor leagues because you can keep them. You know, even Reed Garrett's got options, but I thought Reed was so good last year, or at least good enough last year, that I don't think the Mets would play that manipulation game with him. But I think for Waddle and Cabrera and Davinsky and Grant Hartwig, who they got rid of, but now he's back, and Anthony Gose, they're just going to have to be lights out, and they're going to need to be injuries because I just don't see the avenue to a guy like Chris Davinsky making the team. I can see it with Cabrera, especially if I'm right that Minter goes on the IL. But then they may look at Danny Young as a better option. I'm interested in Genesis Cabrera. I'll be curious to see how he throws, but that's the complicated part with these arms. There's only a certain amount of spots. Hopefully they can get a bunch of these guys to go to AAA because then, Hoff, we're going to see them in the middle of May anyway. We'll see everybody by the time this season's over.
Well, I remember last year how they used Michael Tonkin. I mean, that guy was basically, volleyed around the league for the first 2 months of the season, and the Mets got him twice. And I could see something like that happen with a guy like Chris Davinsky because he's got that veteran mindset. He has had some unbelievable seasons in the past with the Astros.
Yep.
It's been a while. But I mean, like you said, there's gonna be a ton of injuries. It's gonna happen. What's your predict? Did we talk about predictions on how many pitchers are gonna be used this season? Can we do that over under 2?
That one is so depressing to do because when you think back to last year, I remember we were doing our grades, Rico. We were grading like everyone who pitched for the Mets or everyone who was on the Mets at some point. And it's crazy to think about some of the guys you forget they actually pitched. Like Matt Festa. I mean, who remembers Matt Festa? We mentioned Julio
garbage.
so for context, do you remember how many? And I'm not going to include position players. Let's take Eddie Alvarez and Luis Torrens out. How many pitchers pitched for the New York Mets in 2024?
I want to say it was 34.
Very good, bro. 35.
Yeah.
The number was 35. I think it's going to be in that range. I think it's similar. So I would say that's why a lot of these guys, and that's why, as much as it drives people nuts, let's say Huascar Brazoban throws 12 scoreless innings in spring training, and he looks great. And we're going to sit here and say, wow, Brazoban's got to make the team. He looks amazing. They are going to emphasize, and I don't even disagree with them, the ability to keep a pitcher in their organization over just DFAing someone because they didn't have as good of a spring training as the other guy. Like Sean Reed-Foley, who has no options, versus Huascar Brazoban is not a fair fight because they can send Brazoban down. If they want to send Reed-Foley down, he's gone. So just get used to that throughout spring training. That's going to be kind of a frustrating thing. Any thoughts and emails? Of course, you can send it to us, the RicoB@gmail.com, the RicoB@gmail.com. Coming up this week on the Rico Brogna, we'll check in on what Juan Soto had to say, Pete Alonso had to say as they get to spring training. I mentioned we are going to project the 2026 offseason just so we get it out of our system as we continue to get you ready for this season of 2025. We appreciate you downloading and subscribing and listening to another brand new edition of Rico Brogna.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Rico Brogna podcast. It's amazing, isn't it? Make sure you download it now to keep it on you at all times.